So Profit First really allowed us to kind of think through that in a systematic, like vanilla way where it's not emotional and I'm just looking at the returns.
Yeah.
I love that.
Another piece of intentionality that I really focus on, and I've seen my peer set focus on, is paying attention to who you're around, right? And if you're not in the room you want to be in, how do you get into that room? If you want to be a high achieving business owner, or you haven't bought yet and that's something you aspire to do, how can you get around the people who are doing it, right?
For sure.
Not ambiguous. These people are very approachable. Largely start with the person who opened the coffee shop down the street, right?
Yep.
And then build up from there.
100%. And I would encourage everybody, like reach out to Tato and I or anybody else. Like I had a call with a guy yesterday who's kind of an ex-private equity guy who's like, I really want to just operate. I want to own my own business. And so he's thinking through how to build his model and how he's going to do this. And he's totally got like the competency and the cash. He's going to do great.
Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, a podcast for purpose-led entrepreneurs looking to master the art of buying, selling, or optimizing small businesses. Your host, Chris Seegers, founder of Exceptional Companies and author of Selling Main Street, has over a decade of experience starting, buying, and leading successful businesses. He's here to guide you through the complex world of business transactions and growth. Each week, we dive deep with actionable insights, expert interviews, and real-world strategies to activate and equip you to live exceptionally and build exceptional businesses. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Here's your host, Chris Seegers.
Welcome back to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, where we discuss how to buy, sell, or build your business. Tato, welcome back to the show. It's been a bit since we've recorded one of these.
I know.
I always love
spring
jamming
hiatus. We're back.
That's right. Exactly. So we have had a lot of questions from sellers around, as I'm thinking about selling my business, what's the type of buyer I should entertain? How should I think about buyers? How should I think about a good marriage? And so I really want to talk to you a little bit about that today and just put some great content out there for our listeners. And I want to start with, you bought a business, years ago, and you were a buyer. And you were a seller. And so tell us a little bit about maybe some of the tension that came through that and whether it was a good fit or not a good fit. And as you think back, what are some of the things you might have done different?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that, like with anything, there's so many dependencies here, right? Like every business is different. Every industry is different. I think there are certain industries and businesses where, for example, and some people will disagree, but for example, if I were to go buy an accounting firm, I feel like it would be more advantageous for me to be a CPA or a bookkeeper or what have you. Again, there are plenty of non-accountants buying accounting firms, so I'm quite sure that there's no shortage of people who would argue with me on that. Similarly, like I've heard of popularity around buying up like vet clinics, et cetera. Like if I had experience in the medical field, I would feel like that's important in kind of stepping into that type of purchase. The business that I bought is in the construction industry, trades industry. It's manufacturing. And you didn't need any prior experience or skill in buying this business. And I know that because I had no prior experience or skill. And I think there's an absolute plethora of businesses like that it doesn't mean that the buyer can be dumb by any means, but you don't need, preliminary knowledge. There's, you can learn as you go type thing. And so that, should hopefully give, plenty of hope to buyers and sellers alike, right? There's so much that you can jump into and learn on the job. And that was very much my experience. I don't know about you, but I love Shark Tank. Like that's like one of my favorite shows. And so often the sharks are like, I invest in an entrepreneur, not necessarily the business. And, I think that they say that loosely, but I understand the sentiment, right? They're really like investing in that person. All businesses is a collection of people, right? It's a collection of customers, a collection of employees. And so, that buyer and seller is really just a people relationship, which all the other aspects of business kind of are. And there was definitely a conversation early on with my seller. I'm paraphrasing, but the sentiment was, on paper, you make no sense and I should have turned you away, but I wanted to give you a chance. And in our first conversation, like I could sense the drive in you and I felt like it was worth pursuing. Right.
Interesting.
And he, like self-flattery aside, was right. I showed up and I was really engaged and asked a lot of questions, asked the right questions, and just showed true intentionality and drive and motivation. And it helps that I could speak to a past that was not related to what it is that the business did. I could speak to a past of, real estate investment and pushing other mountains forward, right? And so it gave him comfort in, again, pursuing me as a buyer and vice versa, and feeling like he wasn't, truly wasting his time. And so that feels ambiguous, right? Like you have no idea, how two people are gonna, react to each other and get on. But I truly believe that if you can, I don't know, I guess like kiss a lot of frogs and kind of see like who you feel you mesh with the best. I don't know if that's like the best way to say it, but kind of culture
For
fit,
sure.
What you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. I think it also depends too on when a seller comes to us and says, hey, we want you to represent us on the sales side. And we have this conversation. I ask them, well, it's really up to you what the buyer looks like.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about inside sales versus outside sales and also different classes of buyers. So we met with a client 2 days ago and they said, okay, what are the types of buyers? And I said, okay, here are going to be the general buckets. You've got private equity groups or, some sort of outside capital group. You've got family offices, you've got individuals, or you have maybe like a individual collection group of folks that are going to invest in something together. What's really interesting is there was a Wall Street Journal article that came out yesterday that is similar to my thesis. And it was a bunch of doctors that had gotten together and had warned the accounting industry, hey, you guys should be very cautious in roll-ups because private equity funds generally are very poor operators. That's been my experience. I think they are very good at fundraising, generally have very good financial minds, but most folks within the fund have never actually been in a business and run a business. And so how you serve your patients as a doctor group is very different than somebody who's just like, hey, we got to grow sales, we got to grow our margins. I don't really care about the human being on the other end of it.
Right.
And so the private equity roll-ups in the medical space, I think, is really detrimental to the U.S. And it's now moving to other white-collar service. So our CPA firm has now been acquired by a private equity group, which I'm a strong opponent against and told them that when they were considering it. There's a couple law firms in Colorado Springs that are being acquired or have been acquired. And I understand you have partners that need liquidity events and have a lot of their equity and net worth tied up into this business. So anyways, going back to kind of the perfect buyer, if you've got a bigger business and private equity is sniffing around it, I really want people to get clear on, well, what's your legacy? And I love an honest seller. If a seller comes to us and says, I want maximum dollars, that's way easier than somebody who kind of maybe misconstrues it and says, hey, it's all about culture and this. And then we get 3 or 4 buyers to the table and it's like, nope, it's this dollar amount. And I'm like, well, this buyer fits exactly what you told me. And they're like,
well,
no,
I want the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So it's been really interesting to kind of think through that. But we do a lot of work on the front end because especially if a seller wants to transition for a longer period of time, if they're going to do a 6-month to 3-year transition timeline, if it's a bigger business, we're like, look, you've got to like the buyer a lot. You have to have a really good culture fit, make sure you have similar values, and make sure they would be a fit for your clients and your team. If you're just going to smash a bunch of companies together and don't really care, then it doesn't matter as much. And I would go back to that point where you said you didn't have any skills. Every buyer has a set of skills, right? You weren't in the construction industry, but you're very good at sales and you're very good at like understanding processes and marketing and simplifying them. And so that was one thing when you went in there, I was like, oh, this business is going to grow. And you have grown that business dramatically from where it was when you started, because that's one of your zones of genius. So I love that. Okay. Any other thoughts? And here's a question. As you think about buyers for your business, and you're not in a position where you're trying to sell, but we always tell every single business owner, you should build a highly sellable business and highly valuable business every day.
Yep.
You should know what it's worth. You should be ready to sell it, because the majority of transactions happen because of the D's, disability, divorce, death, some issue. So it's usually not this thing where you have this great plan and then you go to sell it and it sells perfectly based on your timeline. It's usually something health related, honestly, is usually the biggest one, comes up and they're like, hey, I'm ready to go. So as you think about buyers for your business, what are you considering and how would you think through that?
So there was a lot my seller and I didn't agree on, but the thing he was spot on about was placing a lot of importance around the person who was taking over his operation, which is funny because it was such a small operation and I really only acquired 2 people, only kept 1. And so you could consider that people impact really low, but no matter how little his business was, it was super important to him. And I have grown the business considerably. I have 8 full-time employees now, and I would place the exact same amount of importance on that. For better or for worse, I'm super close with my employees. We very much have a friendship. Obviously, ultimately I'm in charge, and that's a whole other story. Trying to claw back some of that respect has been a long road, but they really are people like I genuinely care about. And so I would place great importance on someone, ideally younger side, because I have a really young workforce, so that perhaps that person is still relatable. I think that, I was able to gain a ton of trust from my employee base by being relatable. I would place importance on what that person's intention was for the business. Do they really want to learn it and understand it? And continue to operate a business that is profitable and well run, but is also in service of the people who work for it. Like that's like totally something that would come out of your mouth, and one of the things I respect most about you. I really do try to come from, an employee service place as often as I can. Sometimes, you have to place the needs of the business first, but there only a certain subset of people are actually willing to prioritize that.
I love it. Okay, so why would you think a business owner should be considering what type of buyer they want earlier than later? How would this help you in your approach as you continue to build your business over the next 1, 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah. Honestly, one of my favorite words is intentionality. I truly believe that the highest achieving people on this universe are really intentional people. They don't react, they plan and they create, right? And so, if I have no intention of selling my business right now, that absolutely does not mean that I should not be planning on selling it, right? I make this equivalence a lot, and it's so true. We just bought the house 3 doors down from us. It foreclosed. It's going to be our 14th rental property, right? And I don't know how many that we've rehabbed. So I bought it. It's in disarray. I don't intend to sell it anytime soon, but does that mean I'm not going to make it better? Of course, like we're taking it down to the studs. We're going to make it beautiful. And then we can decide if we want to sell it or not. We're probably not going to, but why would I leave it how it is, right? And so while that's like a simplistic metaphor, why would you not plan with the end in mind to ensure that you're doing the absolute best you can every single day by the business, by yourself, by the people around you, so that when you eventually do get to that point, you've done all the hard work, right?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that begin with the end in mind quote. And that's what we've really been trying to get sellers earlier on. So folks like you that are like, I have no intention of selling even in 10 years, because then we can help coach them on building out enterprise value in your business and having it being driven by your personal plan and your wealth plan. So if you're like, hey, I need my business to be worth $3 million when I exit to serve the retirement needs that I want. And you could say, I want to retire when I'm 40 or 50 or whenever, right? 60. I never want to retire. But we want that personal plan and that wealth plan to drive that business plan. And then for you to be measuring that on a monthly or quarterly basis to where you're making progress. And then when we build that enterprise value growth plan, it also informs, like I was telling you earlier, it gives you the exact 90-day rocks or action items you need to do to create that value. So it gives you this very clear plan to say, hey, my business is worth $1 million. I want it to be worth $3 million. That doesn't mean I'm going to sell it, but that's what I need to support my family or retire with dignity or whatever it is. And then you can map that out and actually build that instead of, I see a lot of business owners that are just like, I want to grow this year. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, we're going to grow top line by 15%. And I'm like, well, that's great. But like, what if you smash your profitability?
Yeah.
And the profitability of the business is important, but it's one piece of the overall equation of when a buyer actually looks at a business and says, I want to value this business. It's one piece of it. And it may only be 20%. If you've got high profitability, but you're totally involved and you have a really bad team and really bad systems, your business is still going to be on the lower end of the valuation range. So we just love to kind of activate people and have them start thinking. The other thing too is when you start the Who Not How book that Dan Sullivan wrote, when you start thinking about the who's in your universe, could be an employee, could be a buyer, could be a spouse, potential spouse. When you start actually putting that out there where you're like, oh, I want to kind of draw an avatar of the potential buyer I would need in 5 to 10 years. Most likely you're going to find that person.
Yeah.
And you're going to find that person in the journey. And then you're going to say, my business is
I couldn't
sellable.
agree
It's
more.
worth this. Like, do you want to buy it? And it
Yeah.
could be the same thing with the real estate deal. You have this portfolio. You're like, I don't know when I'm going to sell it, but when I do, I want to have the right person and the right capital stack that can come in and buy it. So I love that.
Do you like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now and check out our website, www.excoadvisors.com. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
What are some other ways? So that's kind of where I wanted to dig into this concept and just give a little bit of background for our listeners and viewers. What are some other areas that you've been intentional in your business, or you've seen other people be really intentional in their business?
That's such a good question. I am a very intentional goal setter. And to your point, like specific goals, right? I did a pretty extensive goal mapping process end of last year. And it was great. I'm so glad that I did it. It wasn't just like, oh, grow by 15%. Like I really broke down like, okay, from 23 to 24, how did we grow top line? What did profitability look like? You know, what did my staff count look like? What did my own contribution look like? Did I, you could have everything look perfect on paper, but then, oh, caveat, I worked 100 hours a week. So like getting super clear on every, kind of like what you were saying, like every single aspect, right? There's so many pieces to this that make up a successful business, and they're all important. And then mapping out, okay, what's my perfect 2025? In fact, I'm a huge believer in manifestation. And so my manifestation for 2025 literally says like, the perfect 2025. And I always, whatever I think I can achieve, I try to up it by like 10 to 20%, right? Your goals, you should always be reaching for your goals. If they're perfectly achievable, you haven't done right by yourself. And it's really fun and exciting to see those come to fruition. Now, as we close in on the first half of the year, it's like, oh, wow, like I actually really think that I can do that. So again, just getting extreme clarity. Another thing, this is specific and tactical, but profit first.
That's a great system. Absolutely.
Yep. I've adopted that. One of many systems you could, vouch for on this podcast, but just finding, like, it's very similar to clarity, right? Like finding systems to help you operate in that clarity and grow and become better. Profit first has been super game changing.
I love that system too, because it's allowed us to, and we use it, I would say roughly. We have so many entities. When we started setting up all the bank accounts, I was like, holy smokes, we're going to have 1,000 bank accounts. This doesn't work. But what we did is we just started we basically said, let's start sweeping cash into our profit account from all the businesses. The great thing, that makes us be very intentional on how we're reinvesting. And so we could say, hey, we're going to buy another business, which we're doing here in 90 days. And that we believe that's the best investment for those dollars right now. It could be, hey, we're trying to buy an office building, but that's not a great investment. So we've kind of said, hey, when we have additional cash, we'll think about that. But there's some really great tax benefits. So we need to put that into the equation. But when we swept the cash, instead of saying, hey, we're just going to reinvest it into this one business, that business has to compete with capital alongside of every business in our portfolio, as well as new opportunities. And then we can also start thinking about, as we think about selling businesses we own and we don't have any plans to, we can start saying, hey, this is kind of a laggard in our portfolio. Is this a business that we should be reinvesting? Did we miss something? Is there something going on? Or are there other opportunities that we can continue to kind of slot in and then sell off the bottom part of the portfolio? And that's how we bought a ton of real estate from 2012 on. And then we started slowing down because we're like, man, the returns on these businesses are so much better. We've got a skill set for it. We still want to buy real estate because the tax benefits and, overall, like I love real estate. I love any type of real property. But I started I'm liquidating some minerals and royalties that I own. And one of my buddies was like, why would you ever do that? And I'm like, well, I'm making this kind of return, but I've already got a 3X baked into this asset, but I can take this $100,000 and buy this business that I think is going to make us a 10X return in the first 12 months. And that's using leverage and some other things, but I'm like, there's just no reason for me to keep it in this other asset. So profit first really allowed us to kind of think through that in a systematic, like vanilla way where it's not emotional and I'm just looking at the returns.
Yeah.
I love that.
Another piece of intentionality that I really focus on and I've seen my peer set focus on is paying attention to who you're around, right? And if you're not in the room you want to be in, how do you get into that room? You know, if you want to be a high achieving business owner, or you haven't bought yet and you know that's something you aspire to do, how can you get around the people who are doing it, right?
For sure.
Not ambiguous. These people are very approachable. Largely start with the person who opened the coffee shop down the street, right? And
Yep.
then build up from there.
100%. And I would encourage everybody, like reach out to Tato and I or anybody else. Like I had a call with a guy yesterday who's kind of an ex-private equity guy who's like, I really want to just operate. I want to own my own business. And so he's thinking through how to build his model and how he's going to do this. And he's totally got like the competency and the cash. He's going to do great. And he was so thankful for us kind of sitting down and just doing some strategy sessions. But I'm like, look, we're all here trying to make this pie bigger and help each other. We're abundance thinkers. We're not scarcity thinkers. And I had a ton of help. Like none of this would have happened without all the mentors that came alongside. And I had great mentors from like an early age. So I love that, the tribe you surround yourself with.
I'm also really focused on putting dollars toward building out processes and systems that don't depend on me. My bigger spends this year is going to be a technology system. Right now, we have systems in our business. They are not technology based. So while I'm proud of how far we've come, to an extent, we have to take a bum to what we do because it's just not modern, right? And we're not going to move forward until we fix it.
For sure.
And so while I'm like at the investment, you know, the question asked and answered, is what we do now dependent on me? It's dependent on me and the couple other people who have the process in their brain. And even if we mapped out the whole process digitally, which we have done, you know, to an extent, all the process is on paper, right? Like it's holding us back.
100%.
It's holding us back from growth and from creating value. And so, you know, is it an investment that I look forward to opening my wallet for? No, but I know that it is one of the most important investments I can make because it's further offloading anything from my brain or my responsibility into a computer system that anyone with the instructions to do so can run.
I love it. Okay, so I always close the podcast with resources. So what are you reading? What are some of the things that you've just loved? And I'll start because I'm reading a book that I love. It's called Unreasonable Hospitality. It was written by a guy who owns one of the top restaurants in the world, but he's just a phenomenal business person. He's got a great eye for humans flourishing, which is kind of one of our mission statements. And so that's a book that has really reminded me we're all in the service industry and we should be looking for ways to really shock our clients with how well we love them. And I've done a bad job of that. And so one of the things we're doing in our office now, when we bring clients in, we've created this little menu of snacks. And it's just a different view of saying, hey, I know it's hot and you've been running around all day. Hey, can I get you, a Snickers bar and this or some Perrier? Like we've kind of just tried to elevate. And then another thing that came out of the book is we've started going out and just paying for parking for our clients. We have an annoying parking system in Colorado Springs where there's parking for 5,000 miles, which I hate. So hopefully somebody from the city listens to this. But anyways, we've just kind of gone outside and just been like, hey, we want to pay for your parking. Come on in. Let's get you a water and that sort of thing. So what are some resources, books, tools, things that you've really loved over the past 90 days or so?
Yeah. I feel like I've plugged this before, but I'm just going to endlessly plug it because specific for your audience, it's so good. All of the Acquiring Minds content is really tactical towards both buyers and sellers. And I feel like they talk to such a breadth of guests that like the viewpoints I always take something from listening to those sellers and buyers. And then I actually listened to a specific podcast episode recently that I could plug. I don't know if that's too specific, but it was with a business coach.
Cool.
And more of like a mindset coach though. I get too emotional about my business and it was really about being objective. And I thought that I took a lot from it.
Great. Do you remember what it is?
I need to buy that book though. What's that?
Yeah, the book's awesome. Unreasonable
I need to
Hospitality.
buy that.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Okay, any closing thoughts, Tato, for our listeners and viewers that you want to share, or encouragement, or anything of that nature?
Yes, I would say that if you're at the very beginning and you feel very intimidated by us talking about the end, I was at the very beginning 3 years ago, literally knew nothing and was drowning in my business that I had no idea how I was going to turn around. Like truly, if I can do it, you can do it.
I love it. Thank you, Tato, for joining us and look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Exceptional Companies Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you liked this show, please reach out through our website, www.excoadvisors.com, for free tools to order a copy of Selling Main Street, or to sign up for our free webinar on how to sell your Main Street business.